Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Carey. What a joy to be with you.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. As I was sharing with you before we started recording, I read Platform in the summer of 2012 when it came out. You got me blogging 3 times a week and changed my life. Like it's
wow.
Incredible.
The rest is history. Well, congratulations.
Yeah. So you are no stranger to stress and overwhelm. You've got a brand new book, which we're going to talk about. As a young leader, we got a ton of young leaders listening to this podcast. So I want you to think back to when you were just starting out, maybe even pre-Thomas Nelson, but Michael Hyatt in his 20s and his early 30s. How did stress and anxiety play and overwhelm even back then? How did that impact your leadership as a leader who was starting out?
Well, I think there are basically 3 approaches to life. And I talk about these in my book, Living Forward, but there's kind of the drift where we end up at a destination that we wouldn't have chosen, but it's kind of unintentional. Then there's kind of the driven approach, and this is kind of what I came out of. My parents were lower middle class, and I just decided that I wanted to make something out of myself, and so I bought into what I today call the hustle fallacy. And I was at work at 6 in the morning. I didn't get home till 6, 7, sometimes 8 o'clock at night. And I was working around the clock. And I would work Saturday mornings. I would work Sunday after church. And I was just working all the time. Rarely took a vacation. And I see that thing, Carey, really affecting a lot of people today because we have so many iconic leaders that talk about, if you really want to get ahead, if you really want to achieve more, you've got to do more. And what happens with a lot of those people is that they blow up their health, or they have a breakdown in a major relationship, and all for the sake of what? Sacrificing that all on the altar of success at work. But the thing that I'm so excited about and so compelled about is I want people and I want myself to be able to win at work and succeed at life, to have the kind of growth in my business that's scalable on the one hand, but sustainable as well.
You tell a story in Free to Focus about the day you thought you were having a heart attack. Do you want to take us back there?
Yeah, so that actually happened right after I got to Thomas Nelson. So I was working hard trying to turn around one of the divisions in the company. In fact, of all the 14 divisions in the company, I got hired to run the one that was dead last in terms of every metric. So we worked hard to try to turn it around. We did turn it around. We went from 14 to number 1 in about 18 months. But I ended up in the hospital 3 separate times in the emergency room thinking I was having a heart attack. And so finally, I decided to go to a cardiologist, and I said, look, I'm honestly scared. I can't even sleep at night because I'm so scared thinking I'm about to have a heart attack. So he ran me through a nuclear stress test and did all the stuff. And he said, your heart's fine. He said, what you have is acid reflux. And he said that mimics the heart attack. But he said the thing about it is this is caused by stress. What is going on in your life? So I kind of told him about this turnaround and what my lifestyle was, and he listened to me. He's very wise, older guy than me. And he said, look, here's the deal. He said, you either make a lifestyle change and figure this out and get a more balanced life, or you're going to end up in here for real, and I may or may not be able to save your life. Your choice. That everything began to shift at that point. It was that point that I met Daniel Harkavy, who wrote the book Living Forward with me. He became my executive coach. And the first thing he had me do was put together a life plan and to begin to resculpt my life and what I wanted it to look like and get a clear vision for where it was going.
In those early days, what were a couple of pivotal shifts? Because I want to get into as much of your new system, really, that you train leaders in. You've trained many leaders in. But, when you're at that point where you're like, wow, I could die from this. What were a couple of quick changes you made that made a difference?
Well, one of the biggest ones, up until that point, I wasn't exercising. You know how it is when you're young. You think, I'm going to live forever and I don't need to exercise. I feel great and all that. But the truth was I was eating terrible food. I wasn't exercising. So one of the first things that Daniel and I agreed on was that I was going to start an exercise regimen and start eating healthier foods. The other thing is that I was going to be intentional with my marriage. Now, today, I've been married for almost 41 years, still in love with my wife. We teach a Sunday school class together on marriage. But in those days, she kind of got the leftover time, and it was pretty much reactive. There was no design, no intention. So get this. So Daniel, with my permission, would call Gail once a quarter and just have a private conversation with her and say, how's he doing?
Wow.
And that created some major accountability for me. And it was really helpful.
Well, those are, and it's so simple. I just went to see my doctor for the annual checkup, and I'm like, how much of your practice is like eat right, exercise, get some sleep? He said a ridiculous amount. And
Yeah.
There's truth to that. That's good. Oh, now, you make the argument that focus and distraction, like the ability to focus and the distraction around us has gotten worse in the last few years, which I think we would all agree. What makes it worse?
Well, first of all, digitization. Almost universal access through social media and text messages. In fact, I was just talking to somebody about David Allen's GTD system. And probably a lot of people listening to this are familiar with that system. He wrote a big book in 2001 called Getting Things Done. And I practiced that system, but we have to remember that system was written before smartphones, before social media, before text messages. And now we've seen the proliferation of inboxes and all these demands on us. We feel like we got to be everywhere. We've got to be accessible to everyone. And oh, by the way, being a Christian actually makes it worse because we feel like we can't say no and that we have an obligation to say yes to everybody.
That's true. Do you want to, because I want to get into the system, but you went there. So I want to pick up on that.
Yeah.
You're right. So many Christian leaders, particularly pastors, and we have a lot of Christians, a lot of pastors listening, they feel I can't say no. And I think the smaller the church, the more true that is. How did you learn to say no? What were, because you're an Enneagram 3, are you not? Did I get that right?
I am.
Yeah. So that's not easy.
It's not easy because I want people to like me, right? So I say that, the reason we don't say no is because we suffer from one of 3 diseases. FOMO, we all know what that is, fear of missing out, right? But there's another one that's called FODO, fear of disappointing others, which I really hated. And then there's FOCO, fear of conflict with others. So the way I learned to say no was twofold. And I talk about this in chapter 5 of the book, chapter 4 of the book. But I talk about the fact that you've got to see a bigger yes behind the no. So, Carey, if you flew into Nashville and asked me to have coffee with you, I would love to do that. But if you said to me, how about 7 a.m., if I say yes to you, I'm going to say no to my workout because that's when I normally work out. And I know if I blow it off in the morning, I probably won't get to it till the rest of the day. So it would be easy for me to say yes to you or say no to you because I'm saying yes to my health. I want to be around for my grandchildren, for as long as I can and be healthy to run my business and all the rest. So behind that no is a bigger yes. And so for me, that gave me the courage to say yes when I kind of wanted to say no. The other thing, and I talk about this in the book, I learned this from Dr. William Ury. It's sort of the yes, no, yes, the power of a positive no. And so I try to say no with this yes, no, yes formula. So for example, because I used to be in the book publishing world, lots of people write to me and ask me if I could review their book proposal. So when I respond to that, because in the past I would just kind of let that languish in my inbox because I knew I needed to say no, but I didn't want to say no, and I knew it was going to disappoint him, so I just kind of sat there, and then it not only disappointed him, it made him angry. But so what I say is I'll say, first of all, here's the yes. I'll say, first of all, congratulations. You've done something that most authors will never do, and that is you've finished a book proposal. Congratulations. So that's a yes. Then I give them an unequivocal, unambiguous no. And so what I say is this. In order to fulfill my existing commitments, I'm afraid I have to say no. So that puts it in the context of my commitment to keep my commitments. That's integrity. Everybody can respect that. But here's what I don't say. I don't say, hey, check back with me in a month, or maybe I can do it when I get out of this crazy busy season, because then I'm going to have to go back through the same thing again. So I go ahead and give them a no. Then I end with a yes. And the yes is an affirmation. And I might say, again, congratulations on getting the book proposal done. I'm sure you're going to see publication on this. So, good luck with it, whatever. And then I send them off. So that makes it easy. And I've had so many people reply to that and just say, hey, I'm disappointed, but thank you so much for getting back to me so quickly. People can handle no. What they can handle is a lack of response.
That's so helpful. And I know I think you actually, I read the book a couple of weeks ago, but you've actually got some templates in the book, right? In Free to Focus on how to do that. In other words, cut and paste, and here you go. Exactly. But what I'd love for you to do, if you're up to it, if you're up for it, is I want you to tell me no for coffee. So I'm flying into Franklin. for some reason I got your cell number or I got a direct email to you and I'm like, Michael, I'm flying in. You changed my life with platform and all the other stuff you've done. I'd love to have coffee with you at 7 a.m. So walk me through, because I'm gonna push you a little bit harder and be that guy who won't go away, and I want you to get rid of me. Okay, so
yeah, okay.
So Michael, can you meet me Friday at 7 a.m. and we can go for coffee or breakfast?
Yeah. So what I would say to that is I'd start it just like that example I gave you. I'd say, Carey, great to hear from you. I followed you on Twitter. Occasionally read your blog. I would love to get together. Okay. So that's an affirmation of your intent. Yeah. And honestly, I would like to get together with you. So if you were in town, I'd like to do it. I just want to do it at a time where it doesn't compromise one of my commitments. So I would say, in this case, unfortunately, I got to say no. That's right. And here's the other thing too. Never explain why. Because all that does is invites argument, invites criticism. People don't need to know, and they're not demanding that you know. Sometimes we feel like we have to justify it, and we give too much information. So I would say, unfortunately, due to another commitment, I can't say yes then, but what about, and then I would propose some times to you.
Right. Let's say
that's going to work in my schedule.
And that's fair. So you want to meet with me, which would be amazing, but let's just say you don't. Because everybody's got those people. It's like, you know what? I'm never going to meet with Carey. And how do I let him down? And we all have those people in our life. We all have those people in our church and our business that it's like, I can't because I'm saying no to my family or, I'm just not going to. So if you were never going to meet with me for coffee, how would you handle that?
Yeah. Well, okay. So this is like a pro tip, but I have, first of all, you would never get to me. So I have two emails.
Yes, true.
I have two email accounts. And by the way, this is something that a lot of people have trouble with, but I really learned this from Andy Stanley. And that is the more successful you become, the more careful you've got to be about the access that you give to people. So I can't be accessible to everybody and really be accessible to anybody, right? Yeah. So my family deserves my best focus, then my inner circle with my team, then I've got a close circle of friends. And by the way, I have 17 family members within 5 miles of my home.
Wow.
My immediate family. So, just trying to take care of all of them, is an issue. So what I would say, first of all, I have two email addresses. I have one that is kind of my public one that if you searched for, you would find. That goes to my assistant. And so he's going to process all the messages in there and he's going to say no for me. Right. Now, the great thing about it is he's incredibly gracious, but he's sort of emotionally detached, and it's easier for him to say no. And so what he would say is something like, maybe he would check with me in your case and say something nice about you, but then he would basically say, during this season, Michael's not taking on any other commitments. He's got all he can say grace over, and, we wish you the best. So just no.
That's it. Just no. See, that's really helpful, and it's clean lines. It's so funny because years ago, I've got a public-private email, and I don't give out my cell phone number very generously either. And part of that is just to protect my ability to write and do what I'm called to do with my life. But you reach a certain point at which you realize, that's why people do that. And, I couldn't have done that when I was pastoring 50 people. But you get to a different place and you're like, you got to have some fences. And that's something to think about. If you're right on the bubble and your organization, church is growing, to think about how you do that. Okay, well, let's jump into the content. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Well, I'm sorry, just another tip there too. I actually have two cell phone numbers. So I have my real cell phone number, which only my family and some of my key executives in my company have, and a couple of my best friends. But then I have a Google Voice number. Now, here's the beauty of it. I hate text messages. First of all, the expectation is synchronous communication. You text, you expect an immediate response. Yeah. That's a total disruptor and interruption to me. So I've got Google Voicemail set up. So when somebody texts me, I get an email message. So then when I'm processing email, which is 2 times a day, then I see the message then. I'm going to get back to people. But I do not want to train people that when they text me, I'm going to immediately respond unless it's somebody in my family or in my inner circle. So a Google Voice number costs nothing. Very easy to set up. And that's the number. I couldn't even tell you my real cell phone number because I rarely give it out. But my Google number, that one I know, and that's the one I give out.
Oh, that's brilliant. And I've seen more and more leaders moving toward that. Well, your free to focus system has got 3 major components. So the first one is simply stop. Do you want to start us there and let us know why did you begin with stop?
Yeah, that's like the most surprising one because you're buying a productivity book because you want to be more productive and you probably start with the third part of the book, which is to act. But here's the deal. We are going crazy with work. We're approaching what one writer called total work, where it's consuming everything in our lives. And what I think we have to do first is to stop the hamster wheel, get off and say, why is it that we want to be more productive? If productivity is a means to an end, and I believe it is, what's the end? Where is this going? So in chapter 1, it's called Formulate, and I talk about formulating a productivity vision. And in my view, productivity should not lead to more work, which it often does. I'm going to get more efficient, more effective, so I can do even more work. No, I think the goal is freedom. So I want the freedom specifically to focus, because I think focus is the superpower in the distraction age. It enables me to, solve the most important problems, be creative, kind of fight through the issues that I'm trying to deal with. But I need focus to do that. It gives me the freedom to be fully present with the people I love, so that when I'm out to dinner with my wife, I'm not checking my smartphone, or when I'm one of my grandkids' soccer games, I'm not checking my smartphone. But conversely, when I'm at work, I'm not being interrupted by my family. I have the freedom to be fully present. Then the freedom to be spontaneous. Some people think productivity means that you have such a structured world that, there's no opportunity for spontaneity. And yet, especially as a Christian, that's where sometimes God interrupts us and we have the opportunity to do our most important ministry. And then the final freedom I talk about in the book is the freedom to do nothing at all. And I learned this from some Italian friends when I was in Italy, and they talk about the sweetness of doing nothing. And nothing is underrated, because that's oftentimes when you have the breakthrough ideas, when you have the breakthrough connections. And so that kind of freedom, if you can get clear on that, then productivity makes sense.
Yeah, the freedom to do nothing. I wanna ask you, what are the things that you still touch? Like, your company is growing rapidly. And for those of you who have followed along the journey over the last decade, like I have, from the early days of blogging and podcasting and the whole deal, like, you've got to be 10, 20, 50, 100x over where you were when you started.
Definitely.
When you were moonlighting, as Thomas Nelson, CEO. What are the things, because you eliminate categories of things that it's just like, I just don't do that anymore. So what are the things that you still touch? What are the things that you're like, okay, this requires my energy, my focus at this time, at this level?
This is critically important for all of us to get clear on. And I talk about this in chapter 2, as you know, with a concept or a framework called the Freedom Compass. So for people listening to this, you can imagine a 2x2 matrix, 4 boxes, I call them 4 zones, and rotate that 45 degrees. So that at the intersection of your passion, what you love to do, and I think this is one of the ways God communicates to us. He's imprinted on us certain things that we enjoy doing, certain things we don't enjoy doing. But at the intersection of our passion, and at the intersection of proficiency, the things that we're really good at, but more importantly, that drive the results we're expected to produce. Okay, it's going to be different for everybody, right?
Yep.
So we call that the desire zone, and that's true north. That leads to more freedom when we focus on that. So for me, today, that's only 3 things. I'm either creating content, I'm delivering content like I'm doing right now, or like when I was in my business coaching groups this last week, or I'm casting vision for the team. If it's not one of those 3 things, then it goes to somebody else. Now, I totally get that for a lot of people that don't have a staff, they don't have the luxury of doing that. This is a journey over time, but it's really important to get crystal clear on that. Here's the thing. Vision always precedes the resources. In other words, you got to get clear what you want before you try to figure out how you're going to make it happen. So that's where I talk about if north is the desire zone, south is the drudgery zone. This is where you have no passion, no proficiency. There's a lot of other people that could do it. And amazingly, the way God's made us all, things that are in my drudgery zone are likely in somebody else's desire zone. So my assistant, Jim, for example, he loves processing email. He loves managing my calendar. He loves all the administrative stuff. He geeks out on that. So we're the perfect complement to one another. But that's the first stuff that I'm going to eliminate, automate, or delegate. 2 other zones, just quickly. There's the disinterest zone, where you're good at something, but you've lost the joy. You're disinterested, and it leads to boredom. I think one of the most dangerous zones, though, is the distraction zone. And this is where you're not very good at it, but you enjoy doing it. And I'll tell you, as a fellow blogger, like when I first started out, the distraction zone for me was tweaking my blog, tweaking my website. And so I wasn't very good at it, but it was a way for me to hide from the important work that God had called me to do.
Do you mean like the design? You were like playing with the layout and the design and the colors and...
the quest for the perfect theme, all these add-ins and, widgets and all that stuff. I'd be looking for that kind of stuff and tested it out. And it's what I call fake work. It's the work that keeps us so busy and consumes so much time and doesn't really produce the results, nor does it really give us any joy. It kind of leaves us empty because we know in our heart of hearts that we ought to be doing something else. But again, it's a place we go and hide from the real important work. And by the way, just because something's in your desire zone doesn't mean it's easy. So creating content, delivering content, for me, casting vision is really hard, but it's also deeply meaningful. And I think I'm good at it. So,
and it produces, I would say, the most results, right? Is that what you're driving at? Like I'm writing a book right now. It is not easy. But I know that is going to have a massive impact, far more than any blog post I could write. Yeah,
that could change your life more than anything, when you publish a book. But just to give you an example, this is why last year, the whole premise of this book is a total productivity system to achieve more by doing less. So last year, my business grew 62%. Now we're a multi-million, 8-figure business. We grew 62%, which by any measure is huge growth.
Yeah.
But get this, Carey, I took off 160 days last year. No contact with the office. I didn't think about work. I didn't read about work. 160 days. That included weekends, but that was 11 weeks of vacation.
Wow.
So I took more time off than ever, and I grew my business. Our average business coaching client, which, by the way, 10% of our coaching clients are pastors, but it's our Business Accelerator program. In the first 12 months, our average client grows their business by 67% while shaving 11 hours off their work week, which is exactly the promise of this book and what we're after.
That's incredible. And it's totally counterintuitive, isn't it? To what most people teach. So we've already got stop. The next step is cut. Anything, we kind of ventured into that zone. Anything else you want to say about cutting, Michael?
Well, I would say delegation is, I think, one of the tough things for a lot of people and a lot of pastors. And this is probably not true. Your pastors are above average, but the people that listen to you. But I noticed that a lot of pastors will hire somebody, particularly if they're sort of the Lone Ranger and they get their first assistant. It ends up being a ministry to somebody that can't get a job who's not really qualified.
Yes.
And it ends up being a mess. But let's just assume you've got a competent person. And the great thing about today is that you can hire a virtual assistant for 10 hours a week. You don't have to commit to somebody full time, right? And I think you've had that experience.
You and I both know Brian Miles and Belay, and we both utilize his services. Yeah.
Yeah. We use them to this day. In fact, they're a sponsor of one of our events. We love them. But at any rate, so what I hear competent leaders say, they usually don't delegate for one of three reasons. And just see if this rings true. Number one, they say, if I want it done right, I have to do it what? Myself. Right? Or they say, it takes longer to explain how to do it. I might as well just do it myself. Or I can't really afford to do it right now, so I guess I'm going to have to do it myself. As long as the answer to those three questions are myself, you cannot scale. You can't grow your business. You can't grow your ministry. So here's the truth. Those are like limiting beliefs, and we have to apply a liberating truth. So the first one, if you want it done right, you have to do it yourself. So here's the liberating truth. The liberating truth is if you hire people in their desire zone, and they're a perfect complement for you, and I could talk about practical ways to do that, then here's what happens. Not only can they do it as well as you can, they can do it better than you could have imagined. I see that reality week after week with my own team. Paint the vision, let them execute, and they come back, blows my mind. This is like more than I could have imagined. The second objection is that it takes longer to explain how to do it, right? Well, that's true the first time, But once you explain it, it's like an investment. Then you start reaping the return. Then you never have to visit that again. It's off your plate. And the third one about affordability, again, I think just trying it for a few hours a week, get somebody, even if it's 10 hours a week, if that frees you up to do the things that really move the needle, the things that deliver the results you've been hired to do, then it's a win for everybody, because there's only certain things that God's made us to do. And I love this quote from Dawson Trotman, the founder of the Navigators, when he said he purposed early in his career that he would never do anything that others could or would do when there was so much of importance to do that others could not or would not do.
Oh, that's a great quote. Can we go back to, you said earlier that you had some practical ways to either find those people. I've got a couple of questions about that first step in delegation. So tell us about the practical ways to get that.
Yeah, well, it's really about hiring the right people.
Yeah. So
we use a system. We don't have any relationship with this company other than we love them and we recommend it to all of our coaching clients. Company's called Colby, Kolbe, Colby.com. And they have a test that measures how people initiate work. Okay? Oh. And by the way, before you take this test, I'm just going to tell you it's a really frustrating test because you're forced to choose between things that you want to choose two things and they only let you choose one. So they force you to rank these things, but it's eerily accurate. So for me, for example, there's four different polls that they measure you on. First of all, there's some people that like to initiate work. It's called fact finder, but they initiate by research. They're just going to go out and study it. They're going to Google it. They're going to read some books. That's how they initiate. Then there's people that initiate through, they call it follow through, but that's planning and organizing. They got to get a whole plan together. They got to organize it. Then they're ready to do the work. Then the third poll is called quick start. That's what I am. That means ready, fire, aim. Just do something and we'll steer the car after we get it in motion. We'll figure it out as we get going. And then the fourth one is implementer, and that's I've got to get my hands on it, or I got to get face to face with people. Yeah. I can't do it abstractly. So here's the cool thing. So you test yourself. They have a system called the Right Fit program, Colby's Right Fit program, and it's for the hiring process. You test yourself, then you do a separate test that shows what you think the position you're about to hire for needs to be successful. Then every candidate takes the same test you took originally. Then what they do is they use some magic algorithm, put all that together, and they give you a letter grade on the people that you're about to consider. So we never hire anybody that scores less than an A-. They give you a letter grade. Every time we violated that, it's been a fiasco. And so we only hire people that have the energy and the initiative to succeed in the role that we're hiring them for. And it works phenomenally. We found it's the greatest predictor of success of anything we've done.
Well, we'll link to all that in the show notes. And that is news to me, but it won't be for long. I'm going to go take that test, check it out, and use that as a filter. Michael, I've heard people say before we leave delegation that if you can find somebody, because that first objection, like if I want it done right, I have to do it myself. And you think you're an expert, whether you are or not. Clearly, you're an incredibly gifted leader. You're probably not the best coder in the world. I'm just going to take a flyer on that and guess that you're not the best coder. Fair. So probably someone else can design a better website, but we've all been there. So one of the rules of thumb, I've heard leaders say, if you can find someone who can do it 80% as well as you, and others would say in a rapid growth environment, 50% as well as you, bring them on board. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't practice that. There's probably some truth to that. But I remember when I was talking to Neil Clark Warren one time. He was an author for us at Thomas Nelson. He's the founder of eHarmony. And he said the reason so many marriages are unsuccessful is because people don't have a big sampling. They kind of take the first person, they marry the first person, that shows some interest. Yeah. And it's not a good match. And so kind of his vision for eHarmony, whether you buy into it at the marriage level or not, was we need to expand our range of choices. And I think this happens to us a lot as leaders in hiring. We kind of take the first person that can fog a mirror, or maybe it's somebody that we like, we just enjoy being around them. And if we would recruit broadly, like I can tell you, Michael Hyatt and Company, for any position we open, we'll probably have 200 applications. And we'll narrow that down. We've got a whole process for this. But we are typically interviewing 4 to 5 final candidates, and that allows us to not settle for the person that's only 50%, can do 50% or 80% of the job, because we want somebody that really can exceed our expectations.
All right, so widen the net would be a better way of looking at that. Yeah, I've always struggled with that quote because I'm like, well, I don't want a 50% drop in quality on some of this stuff.
Me neither.
Yeah, I don't want that. No, that's a helpful take. Yeah. Okay, so the next step is to act. So tell us a little bit about ACT, and then maybe dive into your ideal week, because we would all love to have an ideal week.
Yes. Yeah, so the first part of the ACT section, again, 3 sections: stop, cut, and then act. So now we've got all the work eliminated from our to-do list and from our calendar, and now we're focused on exclusively, hopefully, the desire zone activity that we can do the best. So the first thing I talk about is to consolidate and think of an ideal week. And so this is like, if you could design your week and really be intentional about it instead of being reactive, but if you could design it in a way that you had 100% control of your time and resources, and I get that that's rarely the case, but if you could, what would it look like? So for me, as I started thinking about it, I thought, I hate it when my week is littered with all these meetings and interruptions. It's really hard for me to do the kind of focused work that really drives the needle, creating the content, delivering the content, casting vision. So I said, what if I consolidate all my internal meetings on Monday? Because you kind of get in that meeting flow and it's back-to-back meetings, and I've got the stamina to do that, but not for a long time.
Right.
Then I tried to consolidate all my external meetings on Friday. So I'm happy to meet with people, but if possible, I meet with them on Friday, and when Friday's full, we push it to the next week. Here's the cool thing. That leaves me in my ideal week with Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to do the really focused work that's important. And I break all the work down into front stage, backstage, and off stage. Yeah. Everybody has a front stage, and this is where you may not literally be on a stage like you and I do, but for some people, their front stage is just where they're delivering the results they were hired to do. The backstage work is largely invisible to the person to whom you're delivering on the front stage. It's the kitchen in the restaurant. Right. It's the lawyer doing all the preparation before they, bring a case to trial. So it's all the backstage that gets you prepared for the front stage work. And then there's the off stage work. This is important to plan in your ideal week. Otherwise, everything gets sucked into work. So, for me, offstage time is I get off stage at 6 p.m. promptly. That's a hard stop. I rarely ever violate that. And then the weekends are also offstage time for me. It's time for me to rejuvenate so I can be my best, most focused, most productive self. Once you get that ideal week, and we have a form for it so you can actually do it, then to share that with your assistant, share that with your inner circle, share it with your wife, get everybody on the same page so that you can kind of protect that time together.
I love your book. I've got a course that I call the High Impact Leader that we've run a couple thousand people through, and there's a lot of parallels there. And one of the top questions I get, Michael, is from people who say, that's awesome. You're the CEO. You've kind of been a CEO your whole life. You're in control of your schedule. I'm 3 levels down, and I have to be at certain meetings. It feels like my life is controlled by other people. How do you create an ideal week, I should say, when you're not really fully in charge of your time?
Well, I think this is a basic Christian stewardship principle, and that is stop worrying about what you don't have and get focused on what you do have. So everybody has some discretionary time. I mean, maybe if you're an emergency room doctor or a customer service rep, you're just on call and you've got to respond to what comes in. And so that's what you signed up for. So forget the ideal week. But for everybody else, they probably got more discretionary time than they think. So even if you've only got control of 30% of your calendar, focus on that 30%. So that's number one. Number two, sometimes it requires, and this is the essence of leadership, how could I influence the organization? Could I go, for example, to my boss and say, hey, I was just thinking, I wonder if we would organize our week a little bit better and be a little bit more intentional about this. If this could really change the amount of our level of productivity, because we'd be much more focused on those high leverage tasks that drive the results. And whenever I'm trying to sell a boss or a customer or anybody else that's got perceived control over my life, what I want to do is put it in terms of what's in it for them. So why is this going to get the boss more of what they want? That's how to get your boss to say yes every time, is help them get more of what they want and see your plan as a way of doing that. So it takes a little selling.
Yeah. You talk about mega batching in the book, which I'm fascinated. And you and Cal Newport, who wrote his latest book is Digital Minimalism, which I'm really enjoying digging into. You got it right there. There you go. Fantastic thinker, writer, had a huge impact. And if you listen to some interviews with him, he is like, that guy's offline 99% of the time.
Yeah.
And manages to launch New York Times bestsellers even without having a social media account, et cetera, et cetera. What are you learning about mega batching, and what does that actually mean?
Yeah. First of all, I love Cal Newport too, and he's a friend, and I've interviewed him too, and he's an amazing guy. He's really influenced me. But so mega batching, the idea here is not just to batch things together, and the theory behind batching is that when you get into that headspace where you're doing a certain kind of thing, if you can stay in that headspace without switching, there's a cost to switching constantly. So if you go to a meeting 1 minute and then you're, studying to prepare for something else, and, then you get a phone call, that's not batching. Mega batching, Biggie sizes it, takes it to the next level. So give you an example. I have a podcast, as you know, and we publish it weekly. It's called Lead to Win. And my daughter and I record 13 episodes in a day and a half, once a quarter. That's mega batching. So I have to kind of gear up for it. I have to make sure I'm rested, but I go in there and I'm in the headspace of producing those podcasts. Then I don't have to think about it for another 90 days. That is awesome, and it's so efficient. We typically group video shoots. We shoot a lot of video for the company, and we typically will do that over a 3-day block. And so we'll just mega batch it. We've got the video producers in, we got the equipment in. So let's just go ahead and do it and just stay with it till we get the whole thing done. So yeah, that's kind of how we produce everything in our company, is with mega batching whenever we can. It's not always possible, but there's a lot of stuff you could mega batch.
How do you keep what is the prep cycle for 3 days of filming or a day and a half of podcast recording? And how do you make sure your brain is still engaged in the last 20% of that?
Well, I'm going to tell you a principle that I teach to my coaching clients, and this changed my life. It's called the 10-80-10 principle. Okay. So this is, I have to be involved in the first 10%, and I have to be involved in the last 10%. But the 80% in the middle is not in my desire zone, and there's lots of people that can do it better. So when I'm creating content, for example, we'll have a production meeting on the podcast. Yeah. I'll throw out a bunch of ideas, probably some of them with outlines already included, and then I turn the team loose. They're doing the research, they're doing the show prep, they may be interviewing some of our clients, but they're doing a lot of that middle research, and then they bring it back to me for that final 10%. So I'm adding value where I'm uniquely qualified to add the value, and I'm not gunking up the process where I don't have the energy and frankly can't do as good a job as my team can do. So I have a content team that helps me produce all that. And I do that with every piece of content, even a video shoot. They'll typically give me, like for a video shoot, I'll get like the scripts. If I'm doing scripts, sometimes I'm just using talking points. Sometimes it's a teleprompter. I'll typically get that like 3 weeks in advance, so that I can rehearse it. And I like to rehearse out loud on my feet so that it kind of settles into my, physiology. Yeah. And I get the chance to hear myself say it out loud. And sometimes stuff doesn't ring quite true when I do that, so I can adjust it. But that's kind of what the process looks like.
Of all the things that you teach, and the book is incredible and so much more detailed that we could get into in an hour or even a 90-minute show. What is the hardest for you to still stay on top of? Because everybody's got stuff. Oh, that was so easy to do that. But there's always stuff that's just like, man, this thing, am I ever going to beat it? Or it's always a challenge. What is the hardest part of productivity for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I tend as a leader to not delegate. If I err on that, I tend to abdicate. Sort of delegate and forget. Or delegate and just, leave it to somebody else. And I forget that I need to check back in and, make sure that the thing is still on the track and still progressing in the direction I want. My team's kind of learned to work around that by them taking the initiative and proactively communicating with me. But I sometimes get frustrated. We had a situation last year where something really came off the track that cost us a lot of money. And frankly, I should have been asking some questions, but I just had abdicated.
I appreciate the honesty. We all have that, right? And it's a self-reminder. Another thing I've seen as you have evolved and continued to morph is you seem to be really good at quitting, like just stopping stuff. So leaving a publisher. I remember when you were doing a lot of coaching on public speaking, and then you announced a number of years ago, actually, I forget what it was, but you went from on the road all the time to, what was it, 12 nights a year or something like that. Like you seem to be not macro, hey, I'm a computer software engineer. Now I'm doing surgery and now I have a communications company. I mean, it's not that kind of pivot, but you're always pivoting. You're doing micro pivots in the space that you're in. I'd love to hear about your thought process through that and how you make those decisions.
It's so fascinating that you would say that, because I feel like sometimes I hang on to things, beyond their shelf life.
Okay.
But I'll tell you one that we just did that was pretty massive. So we went through our strategic planning process in 2018 for this year, for 2019. We had the budget all cast. We were all set to rock and roll. And we had a consultant come in December, and he said, okay, kind of share with me, get me up to speed, share with me all the products that you have. So as you know, we have like Platform University, we have Your Best Year Ever, we had Free to Focus, we had Leader Box, we had all these things. And so he looked at it, he said, okay, now explain to me the customer journey. And we looked at him and we were like, we have no idea. People buy something and then they buy something else and we don't know. And he said, that's a problem. He said, I guarantee you, your customers are confused. We knew this in our hearts. And we also knew that our business had become more complex. And frankly, our profitability had begun to slide. The kind of margins that we had enjoyed had begun to slide. And we decided that we were going to completely change everything. So we changed the model. We decided we were going to sunset Your Best Year Ever. We were going to sunset Free to Focus course and live event. And we were going to simplify everything. So now we have a very clear path. We have about 20% of the products that we're offering to the market, and we're still going to grow probably 30 to 40% this year. So again, it's how can we achieve more by doing less? That's constantly sort of the motto that drives us.
Do you ever worry, back to FOMO? Do you ever worry that you're killing the goose that laid the golden egg, or maybe my speaking thing could have really taken off beyond, like, it's hard to do that. It's really hard to do something that is successful and then to cut it. So what's your internal thought process or emotional space when you're going through that?
I think I have to know that there's a bigger yes, that there's a bigger opportunity. Like when it came to speaking, I was speaking about 70 times a year. And I said, I love speaking. I thought this is why I left Thomas Nelson, was I want to speak and write, right? So I'm living the dream, except that it had become a nightmare because I was constantly away from my family. I've been married for 41 years. I got all my kids nearby and all my grandkids. And I said, I hate this. I hate sleeping in a hotel. I love my own home. So I embarked then. I said, that's got to change. I got to embark on something that's going to get my life back. So first of all, I made the decision. So I'm saying yes to something bigger than what I was saying no to. And then over 18 months, I began to just, try to change the direction of the ship. That's when we founded Platform University. So we created monthly recurring income there that got me off the road. And now literally, this is crazy, but so my favorite thing to do is our business coaching program. We have 320 people in that group coaching program, but guess what? They all fly into Nashville.
They come to you.
I get to speak 44 times a year, and I'm in bed every night. When I'm doing that, I just went through a cycle of those here the last week and a half. And it's awesome. I got to work out every morning in my gym. I got to come home at night to my wife. I got to sleep in my bed and still got to enjoy what I was doing.
Wow.
This takes design.
Pardon me?
I'm sorry. This takes design. You just can't, you're not going to drift into this. But I think there's a lot that's possible if we would just kind of imagine what it is that we want. And it's so interesting to me. I talk about this in Your Best Year Ever, but Jesus 3 times asked people, This is the Son of God, right? He asked people 3 times, what do you want me to do for you?
Yeah.
And apparently their clarity about what they wanted was important before he was going to do what they asked him to do. And so I've thought, what is it I want? I think that's something God's constantly calling me to do, because I do think he works within my desires. And obviously this has to be sanctified and offered up in prayer and with a willingness to, change direction and be interrupted by the Holy Spirit. But my action is, what do I want? What is the thing that I want to do? And let that sort of be the map to what God's will is for me. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And it's great. And I think it's easy to leave failure behind. It's harder to leave success behind.
It is.
And that is what I've seen you do time and time again. And it's actually very inspiring, because you would never really get to your next level of success or greater things like Platform University or coaching program had you said, well, I'm just going to tough it out for another 5 years on the road and hopefully my marriage is okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. That's a recipe for ending up at a destination you would not have chosen.
I love how you have your foot on the accelerator. You want to tell us what's next or anything else that we haven't covered so far in the conversation, just as we close?
Yeah, I will. Somebody else asked me this in an interview, and I really never shared it publicly, but I did share it with my entire team in January. But I said, okay, here's the next chapter. I said, I'm going to step down as the CEO on December the 1st, 2021. My daughter, who's the COO of the company, will become the CEO then. So that's going to free me up to be the chairman of the company. And I'm going to still be active in the company, but I'm not going to be running the company, because there's a difference between being an owner and an operator. So I want to own the business. I want to get increasingly more focused on what I do best. And I want somebody else to run the company. And this is really important, Carey. I want my team to be very clear about succession, because I've seen this handled very poorly. And I really want to handle this well, and I want to hand this off to my team. I know they're going to do a better job. They're going to take it to another level. But once I announced the date and I gave the plan, everybody's energized about that, because now the whole thing is, okay, how do we replace me? Because it's not healthy for the business to be dependent upon me. It's not healthy for pastors, for the church to be dependent upon them. It's amazing that Jesus could go away and the disciples did even greater things. That's the model.
That's fascinating, because a lot of people would say, well, doesn't that make you a lame duck? But I love how you said the whole team got energized, because I'm really passionate about succession. I'm not the lead pastor anymore. I'm the founding pastor of our church, and succession is a crisis in the church. But I think do you think that resolved a lot of questions about, like, is Michael going to do this forever? Like, people are thinking it, right?
They are. And I've talked to people, I've had friends that in longtime Christian ministry where, the guy that's running the ministry that founded it, was getting a little long in the tooth, and they know, and he knows he's not going to be there forever. But for whatever reason, he can't hand off the baton. Maybe it's financial, maybe it's just because he founded it, but this is a common thing among founders. But I had people asking the question, even when they were interviewing for jobs, they wouldn't ask it of me, but they'd say, when's he planning to retire, or what's he going to do? Or I had somebody in an all-team meeting one time, a spouse of a team member, stand up and said, what happens if you get hit by a truck?
Right.
I mean, that's a legit question.
Yep.
I better have an answer for that.
Well,
now I do.
I'm glad you do. Michael, this is amazing. Okay, so tell us a little bit more about the book, where people can find it, and of course, where they can find you online.
Yeah, the best place to find the book is freetofocusbook.com. We have some amazing bonuses there. You can buy it from any retailer you want. Enter in your receipt number, and you'll get immediate access to those bonuses. So freetofocusbook.com. Everything else related to me, you can find at michaelhyatt.com.
You've been a gift to me and to so many leaders. I want to thank you for your time today, Michael.
Thank you, Carey. Thanks so much for having me on, and it's great to meet you.